Hi everybody, this is Jennifer from the Creative Aging Network in Greensboro, North Carolina, and today I am going to do a quick tutorial on how to paint a landscape. So let's go over the supplies that you need and then we can get started. So here you see I have my watercolor paper, and this is about 140-pound cold pressed paper, which means it has a little bit of a texture to it. I'll be using a watercolor palette, just your basic watercolor palette, nothing fancy. I've got two brushes. I like to have a big brush for washes and then a smaller rounded tip pointy brush for a little more detail. I will be using a white oil pastel, and then I have a little bit of salt over here because that's one of my favorite techniques with the color. Here is a sample of what we will be painting today. It's a water view with some wildflowers in the front. So, if everybody's ready, we'll get started. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take my white oil pastel and I'm going to draw about 1/3 of the way down across the paper, just like that. And you can kind of see I've got a little bit of pink on mine, so that kind of helps you to see about where I'm drawing, just like that, if you can see that. And I'm going to add some other little lines. Now this is going to serve as reflections in the water. And it's nice because your watercolors will not cover up your oil pastels. Your oil pastels create a wax resist with the watercolor, so they'll still show up. So that's nice, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a barrier. This will be your horizon line, and it gives you a little bit of a barrier between the water and the tree line and the sky that we'll put in. So once you have that and you have your lines, you're ready for your first watercolor washes. So I'm just going to take some blue paint. I'm going to get it really watery here, if you can see, and I'm using my bigger brush. I'm just going to paint right over top of the paper and the oil pastels that I put on there, just like that, just across the top. I'm going to paint over it and kind of pull the color across. Now I'm using a lot of water with this, but not too much. I mean, I don't want it to fade out to where you really just can't see any color if I add too much. But I'm adding more water at the bottom because I'd like for this to get gradually lighter as it goes down to the bottom of the page. The bottom of the page is where we're going to put our wildflowers. So we want that to be a little lighter so that the bright colors will show up and we won't have to have the blue behind them. Not the dark blue, but just a little bit of the blue. There we go. So you can see, and I'm going to add a little more water up here. Right across there. And maybe a little more blue. Now, you can notice I changed my brush strokes. If I pull my brush strokes toward me, short, quick little brush strokes, it makes it look like there are ripples in the water. When I go all the way across, it just makes it nice and smooth. So I kind of like that effect. And plus, if you add just a little more water, you can kind of see where the water runs and the color runs around. Just gives it the effect of water, a body of water. Now, I like that. I have lots of some nice areas there. So I'm going to add a little bit of salt, just sprinkled in the really wet areas. In order for the salt to work, your color has to be pretty colorful and concentrated, and also you need to have quite a bit of water there where it doesn't exactly show up. So now, while this lower part is drying, we're going to use some different colors to put the sky in across the top. So I'm going to clean off my brush. I always like to get it on the paper towel, make sure I have the extra water out. We're going to use a little bit of purple paint this time. And I'm going to use the purple paint and have it go across the top. This is my sky. I like purple skies. Kind of gives you the effect that it's maybe sunrise or sunset. You get the feeling that it's definitely a specific time of the day. Now, if you get too close to where the blue's, you're going to see that it starts to bleed a little. Because this is watercolor. The color is going to follow the water wherever it goes. I'm just going to do some of those marks we talked about coming towards me, like this. Gives it kind of the effect that maybe there's some clouds up there. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of red right here. Maybe just a little kind of fades in there. Gives it kind of a pinkish look to it. Just kind of move that color around with the water. Just like that. And again, I'm going to add a little bit of the salt in there. Makes a nice, really nice effect. So you can kind of see here, and I'm going to hold this up so you can see it a little bit better. You can kind of see all the different textures that are being created in the water and in the sky. Kind of interesting. And then down here at the bottom, I'm going to take a paper towel because I'm really not going to take the time to wait for this to dry. So I am just going to blot just a little bit so that when I put my wildflowers in, it doesn't get really messy. Now, as this dries in here and across here, we can add other layers of color and it will start to deepen the color. It'll look a little more intense. So I'm going to take my pointy brush this time and get it good and wet. And I am going to add some little blotches of red. These are going to be my poppies. And I know poppies aren't necessarily red wildflowers, but I just love the effect when you can make these with watercolor because they just flow and they look really lacy, just pretty. Now there's a couple different ways that you can do this. You can add just little spots of color with watercolor, or, and you can try this both ways, just use water. Do a little circle of water and then take your paint and add it. And then watch it just flow around. Usually when you do that, it's a little darker in the center and then it just flows around. And you can do some of these close around each other. So that you have kind of clusters of poppies. And I'm just going to go around. And I like to do a little bit of both techniques. A little bit of water and color. Keeps it really kind of loose and flowing. And maybe just a couple more. And some of them don't have to be that big. Some of them can be a little bit larger than others. Just get a little variation in there. It makes it more interesting. Okay. So we're going to let that dry a little bit. And then we're going to add something for the centers, but we need to wait for it to dry. So let's go ahead and paint another flower. Let's use our purple paint again. And then we're going to paint something that looks a little bit like a lupine, which is something that I had in my herb garden. And that just is dots of color. And you can do them kind of close together so that they come together and just kind of flow into each other, leaving some space in between the dots. I don't know, maybe you think it looks like lavender. That's a possibility. Just a pretty, something different from the red circles that we have for our poppies. And maybe just have some coming up from the bottom of the page. That looks really nice when you do that, because it gives you a sense of depth. You feel like the viewer is just right there looking out at the edge, the water's edge. So just filling that in, just like this. A couple of different places. Just keeping my paint nice and wet for this. And they don't all have to be long. A couple spots of color in here. Just filling in. Now notice I haven't added any green yet, and we're going to wait to add that. That'll be what we fill in the bottom of our paper with. So the next color I'm going to use is yellow. Still using my little pointy brush, and I'm just going to add brush strokes of yellow in places. Now if you get too close to the other colors, they will run together, and I kind of like that sometimes, because you just make other colors, it'll be a pretty orange in there. But filling in with these brush strokes makes you think of maybe fields of goldenrod. Not my favorite, it makes me sneeze, but go back over here. Just helps to fill in. We have bright, pretty colors. Really, if you're looking at fields of any kind of flower or sunny field, you can't see every single flower. You see bits and pieces of them. There we go. All right. And then I'm going to mix, and you can kind of see where I've done it before here, the white paint with the watercolor. I'm just adding a little bit of red so that it gives me like a pale pink. And I'm just doing dots, just around, little dots. And you can go over top of some of the other flowers, some of the yellow, and just add these pink dots, maybe in clusters, just kind of haphazardly. Just creating a field of wildflowers in here. Just like that. And those are just kind of vague. They don't show up that much. They're not overpowering, but it does help to fill in. And maybe that's, you know, some tiny little flowers. Okay, so while that's drying, we're going to go back up to the top of our paper here, and we probably got some really nice techniques now. I'll hold this up a little bit better. Little nice effects from the salt and the water, the way the colors are blending. So now we're going to make a tree line up here at the top. And I'm just going to use, to put that in, some green paint, and I'm going to get it really wet. But I want it to be kind of thick. I don't want it to be runny. So I'm just going to kind of smear around in there, a little bit of water, get my paint pretty thick so that you can see it's on the brush, pretty thick here. And then I am going to go around that tree line, right here at the horizon line, just kind of filling in. Now they're different. You don't want to paint every single tree because you can't see that from a distance, but you can see just the outline of them. And I'm not going to go all the way across, but just fill it in like that. There we go. Just kind of have it fade out, just like that. So it looks like we have the opening of the waterway. Maybe this is a little bay heading out to a larger body of water. Go back and add some more green in here. Yeah, I'm also going to add a little bit of purple closer to the edge of the water down here in the bottom. just like that. To add a little bit of depth and shadow across the bottom there. Maybe some up into the tree parts. There we go. That looks good. Now I'm going to deepen my sky a little bit because it was very watery and it's just kind of faded out. So I'm going to add a little more purple, not so much water, more paint, and just fill in there just a little bit. Just across there, and a little bit more red, I think. Just blend that. Just like that. Definitely gives you the sense of a time of day when you do that. And just work your color around. Just play with it and get some nice effects that you like. Now, whenever you're painting water, you have reflection. So if I have purple and pink in my sky, it needs to be reflected in my water as well. Water is always as dark as your surrounding area and as light as your surrounding area. So I'm going to add some purple in here to just reflect the sky. Doesn't need to be a lot of it. You just want to pick up a little bit of the purple color. And then the pink as well, a little bit of red. Closer up here, the red would be reflected this way. Now notice I'm not getting right next to the sky because it will start to run together. And then I'm just drying off my brush and then pulling that color around, just like that. Some nice reflections of our sky and our clouds and the water. There. I like it. And you can kind of see this is a really nice area in here. Now, add a little bit more of the salt. One of my favorite things with the watercolor. There we go. Okay. So now we're going to move back down to the bottom of the painting and we're going to add our greenery. So I'm going to start with my pointy brush again, the rounded one, and just some green paint. And I'm just going to start with some really thin stems of some of my flowers. You don't have to do that for all of them, but sometimes it's just a good way to get started is just kind of see where these stems might be going. Just like that. Now this is, we're going to fill this in a lot, so you don't need to worry about having to make every single one. I'm going over some flowers and around others, and I'm avoiding areas that are still really super wet because I don't want it to all run together. I want you to be able to see some definition of the flowers. But I am going to take the green paint now and just start doing some little brush strokes. Little dabs of color and brush strokes around in here. Just filling in the spaces. Just like this. Just like that. We want it to be full. We don't want to see every little detail. We want it to be able to fill in with some greenery. And as soon as we think that it's a little more dry, we'll put our grasses in. And we're even going up into the yellow a little bit. of these yellow flowers. Nice little brush strokes. And in some places the colors do all run and you just get some nice flow of color and water just all working together to create these nice effects. Just like that. Need a little bit more green paint here. Okay, so while that green is drying, we're going to go back to our poppies. And we're going to add some dark centers. Now you can see some of these are pretty wet, and we don't need to do that everywhere, but if you just take some purple and just add a little bit of a dark center, it really starts to look like a poppy. And it will kind of bleed around if the paint's really wet, and that's okay. Just kind of does its own thing and keeps it kind of spontaneous. There. Maybe one more right here in this one. There. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of blue and go back into my purple flowers with some blue. Just adds a little bit of depth, just a couple of dots in places. And maybe even in some of my poppies as well. Just like that. Just makes it more interesting. You get that depth of color in there. All those different colors. There. I like it. Okay. So while that's drying, I'm going to go back up here and address my tree line a little bit. I like it. I just would like it to be a little bit deeper color. So then again, just adding more green just in some places. And where the color bleeds and runs, it's okay. It just looks like maybe there's a bigger tree popping out of the landscape. It kind of gives it a loose, flowy effect, which is what we like to get with watercolors. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is go back down here and add some grasses. So we want these to be really thin. So I'm going to get my green paint kind of watery, use the tip of my brush, and very lightly touch the paper. Bring these grasses down. Just like that. Again, you need your paint really watery for this. And you don't have to go every which way, but you just pull them through a little bit. Have them go in different directions. Just like that. And you can leave the lines kind of broken and grasses going in different directions. And you'll see where the colors bleed a little bit. That's okay. They're just running together, creating this beautiful picture. Bring some up over some of these areas. Just like that. Maybe some short little strokes around the tops of some of the grasses too, and that just kind of makes it look that they're nice and thin and twisted and turning. And when you go through, you'll drag some of that paint, maybe some of the blues and purples, and that's okay. As long as you have a light touch, it shouldn't bleed too much, and it just makes your colors look more interesting, the way that they blend together. Now I'm going to mix a little bit of yellow into my green so that all my grasses aren't the same color. And just add some of that yellow-green color in there as well. We know everything's not just one color of green. Lots of different colors in there. There we go. All right. So I think that this is a pretty good ending point. I'm pretty happy with it. Going to fill in some other greens in some places. Along the bottom, get rid of any of the white areas that might still be there. All right, and this is my field of wildflowers along the water's edge. All finished. So that's it. We're done. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope that you will tune in again and see what we're painting next time. Thank you. Take care.